Rodney Eade. Rodney Eade, 6 hours ago, was the assistant coach of the Collingwood Football Club. He didn't get sacked, but he has a dual role of he is now the football manager. Jeff Walsh resigned yesterday, and Rodney has taken over the role for the remainder of the season, and is also still in his previous role. What that means for the future roles of possibly Melbourne or otherwise, I don't know, and I'm sure he won't tell us tonight. But Rodney comes from a long line of football. Rodney's father was the CEO of Tasmanian Football, and I met him years ago, and I can understand that, but we all know Rodney's career in AFL and his success in the league coaching, whether it be Footscray, Sydney. He's had a wealth of experience, and has dealt with a wealth of juniors in his pathway, not only as a player but as a coach. And he has seen many a star fail and many a unknown rookie come through the ranks. So Rodney, welcome on behalf of the league, and Rodney Eade, now football manager, assistant coach, Collingwood, and a whole host of other things behind him.
Thank you, Roger. Yes, it's been a fairly hectic 24 hours in AFL footy, especially Collingwood Footy Club. So I think there'll be questions and answers later, so if you want to talk about that or any other footy club or any other footy matter, just put your hand up, and if I don't know the answer, I can make it up anyway for you. Firstly, congratulations for making the representative sides. It's certainly a big honour, and I suppose don't underestimate that. As well for the girls to make the grand final, it's a great effort at the same time. I just want to talk about and hopefully pass on a little bit of, not advice, but a little bit of hopefully some words you might take on board for the future. I imagine here, except the girls, I know they'd probably love to, I suppose most of the guys want to be drafted at AFL footy. So I just thought I'd give you a little bit of what clubs look for, what's vital in being drafted, but also being, I suppose, surviving in AFL football. Give some examples of some guys that you would have heard of who struggled at under 18 level, didn't get games, and some key ingredients, obviously, as coaches that we look for. And even if you don't get drafted, to take that on into your life at the same time. I just asked Sean before, I wasn't too sure. I don't know if you young people know about Gen Y. I think all you young lads and girls are Gen Z, but Gen Y is an opt-out generation. Things get too hard. This is a very general sense. Hit a roadblock, get a hurdle. No, I'll go and play somewhere else. I'll get another job. I don't think Gen Z are like that, but it's one of the ingredients I want to talk about, and as part of my coaching, but I've seen a lot of players, is perseverance. You've got to be able to stick at something. You've got to be able to, you cope with hurdles, you cope with a kick in the backside, whether you didn't, and you'll probably know some of your mates who didn't get picked in the representative side, or that you didn't play in the final game, or whatever the case may be, or going forward you don't. Stick at it, persevere. Doesn't mean the selectors get it right all the time. Doesn't mean that you're a failure. We pick teams in AFL. What we look for when the guy goes back to the seconds, we look for him to show some character and show us that we're wrong. If he sooks, excuse the expression, gets the shits a bit and doesn't want to play properly, well, he's made the wrong decision. He's the one that's going to suffer. We don't suffer because we think that we've made the right decision. We've found out about his character. So persevere. You're never going to have life that's just going to be on an upward curve the whole time. So stick at it. Examples. Matthew Boyd, who's now captain of Western Bulldogs, comes from this area. I think he's Narre Warren boy. Struggled to get a regular game at Dandenong Stingrays under 18s. After that, didn't get drafted obviously. Played at Frankston in the VFA, it's now the VFL, and played in their seconds. Couldn't get a game in their seniors. Got rookie listed to the Bulldogs. Our recruiting manager obviously saw something in him, and he was there 2 or 3 years before I got to the Bulldogs. And along with Daniel Cross, I've never seen, except now for Scott Pendlebury, I've never seen players who would knock the door down so much to get a game of football, who would do everything in their power. And just through the will of his character and the will of him doing extra and looking for ways to get better, he ends up making himself not only an AFL player, captain of an AFL team, All-Australian, and he's a best and fairest winner, just through the will and a strong character and wanting to work hard. So I think there's a couple of messages in that. You get knocked down for whatever reason, don't accept it. Doesn't mean that you're a failure, doesn't mean that that person's right in their choice. Stick at it. Persevere, look for ways to get better. And one of the things I always talk to players about is what the definition of motivation is. We can get motivated by different things. We get motivated by the fear of failure. We get motivated by fear of the coach, fear of the teacher, fear of our parents. It's all short term. It's all short. We get motivated by money, I suppose. But the best way to be motivated is you look for ways to get better. If you can be shown how you can improve, so take that on from your coach, take that on from your parent, that they're showing you, they're not criticising you, they're showing you ways how you can get better. If you can improve, you'll become more motivated. And I've seen a lot of players in that, they've shown how they can kick better, show they can tackle better, they become more motivated and they become better at it. So look for ways to get better. And if you're the best player on the team in the rep side and you're a star, don't think you've got it cut either. If you don't look for ways to get better, I've seen a lot of lads get drafted, come into an AFL club, think they're terrific, and 3 years later they're out because they don't want to work hard. So they're the opposite end of the scale. Matthew Boyd be that type of player. You get drafted number 1, you get drafted 110, or you're a rookie list player, they're all equal. And us coaches look for character, look for attitude, and we'll be tested along the way. You'll be tested in life as you are at times from now on. As I said before, everything's not going to be easy. All right, so just that's one example. Another example, probably too young, a player who was coach of the Sydney Swans, Paul Kelly. Most of the people 20 years or older might have heard of Paul Kelly. Younger players have heard of Paul Kelly, captain of the Swans in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, and was probably, I would think, he's probably the most courageous player I've seen in my time, in my 37 years in AFL footy. Lee Matthews is probably the other one. And I would think in his time of playing, he was in the Voss, Hurd era, Rashudo. At his time, Wayne Carey, Buckley, I would have thought he was probably the most respected opposition player from supporters. Opposition supporters hated Carey, hated Buckley, hated Hurd, hated Matthew Lloyd, booed them all the time. That's fine because they're great players. But I reckon along with Michael Voss probably, was probably the most respected opposition player through the way he carried himself and his courage. But just a few stories on him. He's a player that when he first arrived at the Sydney Swans, the little whippet from Wagga, Sydney Swans were broke, had no money, so there's no welfare. He had to get up. They found him a flat with a mate he knew from Wagga who got the sack 3 months later. So he's living in Sydney, coming from a country town with no support. Had to get up at 4:30 every morning as an apprentice plumber, catch a train out to Penrith, which is 2 hours out of Sydney, dig ditches, clean toilets, whatever you do as an apprentice plumber, get back to training and train, couldn't cook, no money. After 6 months, one of the key players who's won the Brownlow medal told him he was not good enough, he should go back home, he's never going to make it. I know what I would have done, I probably would have gone home. And I reckon most of us here would have done so. It's too hard. Stuck at it, won a Brownlow medal, captain of an AFL team, and won 3 or 4 or 5 best and fairest for the Sydney Swans, and one of their greatest players ever. Just through will, commitment, and being able to stick out. Spoke to his dad, and I know as young people, I've got young kids as well, you don't want to listen to your father because they're too old, they're stuck in their ways, they're boring and stuff, whatever we are. But he phoned his dad, and his dad said, give it your best shot because you may regret it. I don't want you sitting in a pub in Wagga when you're 25 saying, I could have made it. I want you to stick at it, have a crack, and then you get comfortable with your decision. And just a further story on that, and as I said, he obviously developed himself. Couldn't kick from here to the wall, but developed into a really good kick just through wanting to improve, wanting to get better, and there was no hurdle big enough in front of him. Just a couple of stories on him, which is a bit of the sidelight, I suppose. We all have issues with hurdles and pains, etc. The young people wouldn't remember, there was a game in 1999 we played, the Swans, we played down at Geelong, and it was quite a graphic game. People might remember Darren Creswell that his kneecap was dislocated. He's hitting his kneecap back into place. Same game, Paul Kelly dislocated his shoulder, got crunched by Tim McGrath, got a grade 3 AC joint, which is the worst. Doctor phoned up and said he'll be 4 to 6 weeks. So this is the second quarter. He's pretty tough, Kel, so he'll be 4. Going to half-time, there's 5 players who couldn't come back on the ground. Kel said, jab me up, so we put some painkiller, the doctor put some painkiller in him, went back up, played the second half with virtually one arm. At the end of the game, so I've got an hour drive back to the airport, an hour and a half flight back to Sydney. We probably had to wait an hour after game, so imagine the pain he's in after the game. By the Wednesday, and we're hoping that wouldn't put his recovery back, by the Wednesday, I was starting to think, this lunatic wants to play. I said, oh no, I'm imagining it. Sure enough, on the Thursday, he came and said, Rocket, he said, I want to play this week. Myself being a little bit of a smart aleck, said, oh, well, it's up to the medicos, mate, with the litigation and the medico legal thing, I can't push you out there. He said, no, I've spoken to them, it's all okay. So, cut it short, he's done all his homework and reconnaissance with all the coaching staff, all the medical staff. Doctor said, yeah, he can play, we'll have to jab him up before the game and jab him up at half-time. He'll put his recovery, full recovery back in a few weeks. I said, okay. He said, Rocket, he said, I can't tackle. I said, that's all right, champ. I said, that's fine. Happy with that. We'll actually cope with that. Going to Adelaide. Not a big one on stats. And midfielders said they have an okay game. AFL, probably early 20s, mid to high 20s, a pretty good game. 30 possessions, a real good game. As you know, he's had 35 with one arm. So he had 3 or 4 locals in him before the game, 3 or 4 locals at half-time. Took him off with 5 minutes to go, with 5 goals down, and he cracked it with me on the phone. He said, what's wrong? No, I'm playing well enough. I said, yeah, champ, you are. He said, I just won't be able to play next week. But it just showed me, and I've played with players. I was fortunate enough to play in a very good era at Hawthorn and coached a lot of players. And some players who you might think are heroes too, some of them don't want to play when they've got an ingrown toenail. Some don't want to put their reputation on the line. Oh, I've got an injury and I don't want to play. Because it's all about them to a degree. And here's a guy who's prepared to not only sacrifice his image, I suppose, but also be prepared to put his body on the line for the team, to be able to help the team, and then be able to play with that pain. A lot of players can't play with that pain. So just an example. Now, he's off the Richter scale. He's a lunatic with it all. But it just showed that whatever discomfort we've got, whatever hurdle we've got, we can overcome it. We can overcome it. That everybody else has got probably bigger issues than we've got. One last story on him is, you can tell, is one of my favourites. The biggest advance in AFL footy has been the sports science. You've obviously heard about hot and cold bars, etc., and the way the GPS units we have, and etc., the way we actually prepare the athletes. But back in the mid to late 90s, it was the recovery protocols after games with hot and cold bars. In those days, the cold bars were the wheelie bins, we'd throw the ice in it. And it was big on the recovery after game. We'd have a warm down, and there's food and drink, and the dietitian was big on measuring the amount of food and drink that players would have after games. So she'd prepare little plastic bags for the darlings and put their names on it and have juice and sandwiches and all that stuff and have drinks. And she'd be able to say, anyway, Helen came to me and said, she said, Rodney, Kel won't eat or drink anything after game. I go, oh, here we go. Because Kel's a country lad, doesn't believe in sports science, doesn't believe in sports psychologists, doesn't believe in any mumbo-jumbo. You train hard and you play hard. End of story. So I go and have a chat with him, force some drink and food into him, throws it straight back up. Talk for a bit longer. He said, I haven't been able to eat or drink anything for 5 hours after every game. So if you think about the games you play, you can't eat or drink anything for 5 hours, put anything in your body. Tried him for a bit longer, and I don't mean to go into too much detail here, but ever seen the marathon runners and heard about them hitting the wall? What happens when they hit the wall? They lose control of their bowels. That's why their diet is so important, so it ends up just being water that runs down the leg. Kel said 90% of his games he would hit the wall, he would lose control. We found out then and there that he'd lose control of his bowels. He would hit the wall. Now, if you guys do pre-season and your coach has asked you in 40 degrees to run 400s, and you feel like throwing up, I've been there myself, you make sure the next one you've got to miss out, or you just go a bit slower, because you don't want to go through that discomfort again. Here was a guy who was going back week in and week out and hitting that pain tolerance. And as I said, he's off the Richter scale and he was mad. So he had 15 operations on his body in 7 years and did not miss one game of footy. Imagine the pain and discomfort that he's played with. Now, this is an extreme story, but it just highlights, I think, we can achieve things. You don't have to be the most talented, but the main thing is believe in your talent. Believe in the talent, in your talent you've got. Know your weaknesses with it and work on and improve it. Because you said about you can aim for the moon. Well, I'll give you examples of two guys who were shunned by clubs and told they weren't good enough and ended up becoming extremely good players. One was a great of the AFL, just by hard work and belief and a commitment to it. So please, as young men and young women who actually want to go further, don't take no for an answer. Don't hit the first roadblock and give up. There's a lot of chances out there if you really want to take them. So they're the main things that I wanted to talk about, and where clubs look at when we interview young men at clubs. We really investigate their character. We really investigate their leadership. Here, you probably most of you guys, some think that you've been extremely good leaders, and some think you haven't got your leadership in you. And it's not about voice. It's not about, which can be, but it's about leadership. Is about how you influence people. And you influence someone every day and every time you walk into a change room, just by your body language. And a young lad at the Bulldogs, who's still not young now, Liam Pickett, is probably the quietest guy I've ever coached. Tough, trained hard, told he was no good by Collingwood, told he was no good by another club, and just by sheer will again. But he didn't want leadership. He just wanted to do what he wanted to do, quiet, unobtrusive. But the way he went about his role and his job and his application, he had an enormous influence on the rest of the group. His leadership was enormous, because people would stand back and be amazed about how hard he trained, the extras he would do. Now, he didn't want that until we versed him and said, listen, this is you fantastic, because you are influencing the group. And that's all leadership is. Conversely, you sookie, umpire give you a bad deal, and you had 3 free kicks to go, and you throw your arms around, and you've seen league players do it. That's influencing in a negative way. Your teammates catch hold of that, you distract them. Don't do that. That's selfish. It's all about you. We don't care about that. So give it up. That's just an example. You can have a positive influence, and especially when you're going badly in a game. Stick at it. You've grown so much more respect. I gave the example of we drop players and we're looking for their response. Coaches are looking for a response from you when you are playing poorly. What do you do in the last quarter? You just give up and say, it's not my day? It's not your day. Next week won't be your week either, because you mightn't be in the team. And you won't get a representative side. You won't go the next step because people talk. You think you're not being assessed, you're being assessed regularly, and word filters out. So if you want to be drafted, or you want to give yourself the best chance, and even if you don't, you go on and play with local clubs, have a positive influence on them. Have a real positive influence, leave a legacy, and be respectful to people. So I'd just like to wish you all the best. Thanks very much for coming along tonight. Hope the future holds you well. Okay, thank you.